Let's talk. I was actually part of a conversation not that long ago where I was talking with a friend about how some of the intricacies and mechanics of being a court herald and how courts work. Lots of nuts and bolts, nitty gritty stuff. Nothing terribly interesting even for me who's a court junkie. But one of the things that came up that kind of enlightened me to, oh, I probably should talk about this, was where do Ansteorra award scrolls come from? So I'm offering this for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're from Ansteorra, I think it's important that you understand how these scrolls are made and what and who takes part in the process. Now, if you're outside Ansteorra, obviously this has much, much more limited relevance to your SCA game. But it is a fascinating piece of interkingdom anthropology because I know for a fact that the Ansteorran experience with making and distributing award scrolls is different than a number of other kingdoms. It's not unique, not by any stretch of the imagination, but your kingdom may not do it the way we do. And matter of fact, if you count all the variations that of our system or variations of the system that exist out there, there may very well be multiple different answers to the question of how do we generate scrolls and get them to the people who need them. So to start off with, in broad terms, we use what's considered a pre-printed charter system. That is to say that a design is generated and a master copy is made by the College of Scribes, which is it's adjunct to the College of Heralds, and they both work at the kingdom level. And usually there are two or three masters that are made, and they are very closely controlled to make sure they, number one, they don't get damaged or torn or overused, but also to make sure none of them are altered in any way or improperly kept. If you store one of these scrolls incorrectly, you can crease it. The ink from that copy could fade. There's a care element to this to make sure they retain the best quality, because it's from these that all of the copies are made. The holders of the masters will, on occasion, go to a copy shop, and they will print out a large number of copies of however many scrolls are needed. I have seen some copy runs that were as little as 80 or 90 copies, and I've seen some, or heard of some rather, that were easily 100, 150 scrolls. And they're printed on a very specific type of paper. This is part of the kingdom budget, so it's a not trivial amount of money. And once these are made, once these, they're called, we refer to them as blank charters. They're anything but blank. It's all of the black line. It's all the calligraphy and all of the black lining that goes, that determines the shapes that are being painted on the charter. That's all on there. But they're called blank charters, and we'll get to why in a second. And they are then distributed out to regional scribes. Ansteorra has two regions in the principality now, but the Vindheim scribe, the central regional scribe, and the southern scribe. And from there, those regional scribes will then distribute out batches of these blanks from each of the awards that they have a reserve of to the local illuminators guilds in each local group. And the Illuminators Guild, sometimes they will work individually, sometimes they all get together and they do this, like big illumination meetings or scribal meetings. They will then take these scrolls and they will paint them. Now, what goes into painting a scroll? Each of these scrolls has at the bottom some documentation. A part of it says who the artisans were who made the scroll. Usually it is who is the person who designed it, who is the calligrapher who calligraphed it, who is the artist who actually laid out all the line work. And then it will talk about a little bit of history about what the scroll is emulating, what the design comes from, where in history, what location in history, the century that it roughly represents. That's usually on the footer block for each of the scrolls. And then it also talks about what color palette or what design types we tend that scroll prefers to be used in its painting. Now, some of those are hard and fast rules. Some of them are, frankly, suggestions. I've seen some award of arms or thistles. Two of our, thistles are our AOA levels, Arts and Sciences Award, which very specifically say in that block that this is based off of an early period Celtic design, for example, and it talks about the color palette. And I've seen some absolutely jaw-dropping, gorgeous artwork that has absolutely nothing to do with the Celtic palette that they were talking about, the colors seen in actual historical examples of scrolls or brushwork from that age. It's later period with stark colors and metallics and dot work and so forth. These are gorgeous scrolls, and they're still used. I have several friends who have those type of anachronisms, if you'll pardon the use of that, on their walls, and they're absolutely gorgeous. Now, on the other end of that, however, there are some things that are not suggestions. Many of our scrolls include the insignia of the award, and the insignia are registered badges, and they're registered to the kingdom. And in that, there's much less wiggle room. If it says a red field, you're going to paint a red field. Now, a lot of our more gifted artisans understand that the rules of heraldry are much broader than the rules of art. And I have seen some examples where, yeah, you have a red field, so it's all red. But on the base color red, they will take a much lighter red and do line work. And then it will take a much, much darker red and do shadow work around that. And then they will take a very almost pinkish red and do like dots in the middle of all of these lines. It looks almost like brigandine, but it's all red. So your heraldic requirements are met. Red is red is red is red. But it's this gorgeous artistic display. So it's not the, even in the displays that are very strict about must be this color for obvious and legitimate reasons. Some of our artists can have insane amounts of fun with the options that still present themselves there. All of the charters are painted. I think when I was more active in the illumination community, and I was still painting, a lot of AOA and grant level charters, I think it would take me maybe 2 hours, sometimes 3, to do an AOA, and then you let it dry, which is usually about another half hour, and then what you do is you turn it over, and right behind, usually the first cap, the illuminated capital letter, the largest letter on the page, at least on our scrolls, you take a pencil and you'd write your name and what group you were from. And in our kingdom, when the scrolls are read in court, the herald will read the scroll, and then the crowd will cheer, and he'll hand it over to the noble or the royal, and the royal will then turn the scroll over and will say, scroll by, and read the name of the person who painted it and their group. And again, that's a very important acknowledgement, because our illuminators are a vital part of the community, and they're gifted artisans. And the sad fact of the matter is that kind of by the necessity of the system, they don't get a lot of recognition a lot of the time. So that's a really important moment in court for them to get some well-deserved spotlight on their efforts. But back to the finished scroll now. Now, the ones that are painted are now considered finished charters, and they are collected, and they go back up the chain, as it were. The local illuminators will collect them and send them up to their regionals, and the regionals will then pass them up. Now, they don't go back to the College of Scribes per se. They actually go to the Crown's personal scribe, who maintains the reserves of all of the up there. They are considered, I think I've heard them say, unfinished charters or unused charters. They are painted, they are done, but they are then, right before they are given out in court, that is where they're pulled out, and the specific Crown's individual signatures are put on there, as well as the name of the recipient and the location and date of the award being read, and any other details that the award needs put on it. For example, with a thistle, A thistle is an award for a specific discipline, arts, or science. I have several thistles. One is in heraldry, and on that award, it says a thistle in heraldry, and they had to actually collig in a matching style to the text on the scroll the word heraldry. So that is that is the scroll's journey from blank piece of paper to a copy of a master down to the local artisan who paints it and then signs it and then returns it, and it goes back up, and it is distributed. It's given to the crown and distributed. Now, local groups, baronies in this kingdom, of course, have their own baronial service awards. And frankly, in the non-armigerous field, they can give out as many awards as they want. And I've actually seen a couple of examples, a couple different examples there. I know there are some groups where each scroll is custom made. The artisan, usually a calligrapher, an illuminator, or one person who can do both, will get a list of names, and he's got a master text. These are the words you have to use. And he'll grab a piece of paper, and he'll line it out in pencil, and he'll collig all the text, and then he will draw in all of the capital letter and all the marginalia, and then he will paint it, old style, including the names and the dates, because it's you know when it's going to be read into court and what court it is and so forth. And then, a while later, he will hand over a completed stack of individual scrolls to the noble who's going to read them in court. I've also seen some groups that use a system not unlike the kingdom, where they have blank charters that are a photocopy of the master scroll and text, and individual artisans will paint them. And I do know that there are some examples of baronial awards where, frankly, they used a computer printout for the scroll and painted that in. I know that has sometimes led people to cringe. I just want to say right now that I've talked to a number of people who've received those awards, and as much as we want to say it would be nicer if they were done by hand or by by an artist other than a computer, frankly. I've never heard anyone complain about receiving an award that had a computer printout. It's a decision that had to be made, and it's a decision made by a group that considers it more important to recognize the person for whatever that award is for than it is, not doing it because they don't have the local talent necessary to do enough custom scrolls. So all those options exist, and I can tell you in all of those cases, receiving an award is always an emotional moment. I've seen people smile, laugh, cry. It's getting scrolls is always really emotional. Now that does lead to kind of a side question, and there's also an exception to this, and I'll get to that in a second. Does that mean all Ansteorran scrolls are done that way? All of the kingdom scrolls? And the answer is no. First of all, are there custom charters where someone goes start to finish, blank piece of paper, calligraphy, art, and everything at the kingdom level? And yes, there are. First of all of our peerage scrolls are customs. Usually, and this is kind of a general rule of thumb, the person who is named for a peerage will then commission an artisan to make their scroll, either before or after they're elevated, depending on the circumstances. I also know that there are a lot of examples of people who asked for custom-made court barony scrolls for their court baronies. There's a little bit of a background to that, but I do know that there are a number of court barony scrolls which are in Ansteorra grant level awards. Now, does that mean that all the other awards are automatically preprint charters? No. There are actually two other options there. You can request, or if it is known ahead of time, the Crown or an advocate can request a completely custom charter for any award you want. I have seen custom-made AOAs. I've seen custom-made grant scrolls. I've seen, we have a huge number of scrolls. There's a couple of non-armigerous awards that I've seen custom scrolls for various reasons. And also, there are historical examples that we can emulate by adding on to an existing scroll. Now, what do I mean by that? I'll give you the example. There is actually some historical artwork, like actual, I believe it's English scroll work from the 1400s, that has this image of a man pulling his pants down and mooning a guy on the other side of the page. Like he's on one top corner of the page, on the other side is another guy. The thing is, the guy on the other side is an archer who's drawn out, fixing to let loose with what's presumably an English warbow, and about to give this idiot with his pants around his ankles a really bad day. And a number of years ago, an individual was receiving an award, and they were receiving it largely for their work in archery. And my wife actually was the one who took the existing award charter for that award and added onto the top, right above in the space between the top of the text and the art and the top of the page, added a layer of marginalia that was a fairly solid recreation of this piece of historical art, where this one side you got a guy mooning, guy on the other side, and a guy on the other side's fixing to let loose with a English longbow. It's a gorgeous piece of artwork, and again, a nice shot to the gut to all those people who think that people in the Middle Ages didn't have senses of humor. But you could, an artist could absolutely customize an existing scroll that way. There are plenty of examples of that. Now, that also leads to a couple other questions, and one of which is, well, I've actually heard people ask, well, does that mean that we never change charters? That means that there's no room for new charters, new ideas in Ansteorra? And the answer is no. Currently, my wife is the head of the Ansteorran College of Scribes, so the following conversation is kind of dinner table talk for us. But they are almost always looking for new ideas, new designs, new documentation for new scrolls. I know that they want to go through and expand the scroll types. They want to embrace designs and aesthetics from the Near East and the Far East, China, Mongolia, India, Japan, Korea. These are all distinct cultures with distinct aesthetics, and when we have personas that represent those aesthetics, it's nice to have the option of handing someone with a Chinese or a Japanese or a Korean or an Indian persona a scroll that is complementary to that persona. And if you are an artisan who has that type of ability or does that type of research or would like to work with people who do that, reach out to the College of Scribes, because that's a conversation that they are, last I spoke with my wife, that's a conversation they would definitely like to have. Now, the other part of that conversation is you'll hear talk about retiring scrolls. And there are times where we've just handed the same scroll out so many times, everyone knows the art, everyone knows all the words. One of the jokes on Ansteorra for years was you could tell what a word was being read 3 words into the scroll if you've been in court long enough. I could pick out an AOA in 4 words. I could pick out a thistle in 3. There was one scroll where I think it was a centurion at one point, where it was the only award in our system at the time that started with the word it did. So we all knew if someone was getting read for a centurion, which, by the way, if you don't know, is our grant level fighting heavy fighting award. And we do retire scrolls in favor of newer ones with new verbiage and new artwork. Now, does that mean that those scrolls are shredded and never used? No. The old masters are kept in reserve in case a situation comes up where we need to produce another of the old style. And last but not least, all of this said, and I've described this huge mechanism and lots of different variables and all that. What if you're interested in painting scrolls? Can you do that? And the answer is yes. You will hear, in Ansteorra at least, you will hear the verbiage of a scribe's table or a scribe's point or a scroll painting table coming up at events or a scribal meeting or an illumination meeting. Pretty much, if you are interested, if you have any artistic ability, or even if you have none and want to try anyway, I cannot emphasize this enough. I have no artistic training. I don't think I'd ever really picked up a paintbrush outside of model painting when I sat down to do my first SCA scroll. It At its base core, it's kind of paint by numbers without the numbers. I mean, you have a area that's walled off with black ink, and you paint up to the line with colors, and you kind of go with it. And I painted this one, and I went into a little bit of detail work, just kind of going off what I was seeing other people at the table doing. It was nothing special. I happen to know for a fact, totally by coincidence, I happen to know for a fact that scroll is sitting on someone's wall in the central region, and I wound up coincidentally at their house. I think I was spending the night there or something ages ago, and I saw the scroll, recognizing, oh, that's my scroll. Actually, I think that's my first scroll I ever painted. They go, oh yeah, this one looks great. You did a great job. And looking back, I don't think it's anything outstanding, but it elicited an emotional response where someone said, this is awesome. It added to the moment. So if you want to go paint, if you want to go help be part of that system, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn in saying that the College of Scribes would be happy to have you pitch in. Find out who your local, where the closest scribal meeting is, and find out when the next scroll painting meeting is. And usually what they will do, I mean, at least my experience has always been, there'll be someone there with some brushes that you can borrow for the night, and they'll have a selection of paints, and they'll teach you how to paint, and you can get going. And seriously, I know this sounds like I'm trying to recruit people, and yes, I am, but that's not the only point of this video. But like, if you've never done it before, go try once. The worst you're going to do is hate it, and at which point, if the scroll is ruined, okay, fine, we lost a scroll, big deal. But I've seen a lot of people who have no confidence in their artwork, who will paint a scroll, and someone will go, oh, this looks good, and they'll take like a paintbrush, they'll do a little bit of detail work, like add some dots here, clean up one or two lines, maybe take a pen and clean up one line that's a little fuzzy, like really minor detail work, and like, this is great, and it'll go in the pack, and it'll wind up being read into court someday. So don't underestimate yourself on how beautiful a simple but elegantly painted scroll can be, and don't underestimate how easy it is to learn over time more detailed and more complicated patterns. I know my wife teaches whole classes on how to do detail work on scrolls. The classes are well attended, and her teaching methods are solid, and the work she does and the work her students do is well recognized. So that really is the whole mechanism, at least as much as I want to dive into it right now. Ansteorra uses the charter system, the pre-printed charter system, and that leaves a lot of opportunity for artisans who want to learn to scroll paint to be part of that and to add to the kingdom's reservoir of charters ready to be handed out and recognize its amazing people. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments on this video, or reach out to your local officers. And if you're out of kingdom and you want to talk about how your kingdom does it, I'd actually love to have that conversation. The more I find out about that, the more fascinating it is. So that is it. I could ramble for a while on this. Comes from being married to a scribe and illuminator. Thank you for listening. I will see you at the next event. Until then, goodbye and God bless.